Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today I will analyze the case of Terence Crosbie. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the alleged crime, then offer my analysis. Terence Crosbie was born on September 25, 1986, and lived in Dublin, Ireland. He was a member of the Dublin Fire Brigade. In March 2024, he was one of 10 members of the brigade who traveled to Boston, Massachusetts for the St. Patrick's Day celebration. The fire brigade was due to participate in the St. Patrick's Day parade on March 17. One of Terence Crosbie's colleagues was a man named Liam O'Brien. Terence and Liam stayed in room 610 at the Omni Parker House on School Street in downtown Boston. This historic hotel, which was opened in 1855, has had many famous guests over the years, including Ralph Waldo Emerson, Oliver Wendell Holmes, and Charles Dickens, who gave his first public reading of A Christmas Carol there in 1867. Unfortunately, the hotel was about to become well known for yet another high-profile occurrence. This one would not be positive. Now moving to the timeline of the alleged crime. On March 15, 2024, a 28-year-old attorney reported to the authorities that she had been the victim of an assault of a sexual nature. This attorney has not been identified in the media. I will refer to her as Jane Doe. Here is what the police found during the course of their investigation. On the evening of March 14, 2024, Jane Doe and a few of her coworkers went to the Black Rose Bar in downtown Boston. There she met Liam O'Brien. Again, this was the roommate of Terence Crosbie. Jane did not know Liam's name. She described him as bald, white, shorter than her, and possessing an Irish accent. Liam and his colleagues were wearing T-shirts which identified them as members of the Dublin Fire Brigade. The police were able to confirm the man was in fact Liam O'Brien. At 11:30 p.m., video surveillance captured Jane and Liam leaving the bar. The couple made their way to the Omni Parker House Hotel, which is less than 700 feet to the west of the bar. Jane and Liam arrived at the hotel and made their way to room 610. Terence said that when Jane and Liam showed up, it seemed obvious what their intentions were, so he left the room to give them privacy. Video surveillance confirmed that Terence Crosbie left the room. He sat in a chair in the corridor outside, where he was looking at his phone. Meanwhile, in room 610, Jane and Liam had a consensual sexual encounter. According to Jane, after the encounter was complete, she used the bathroom. When she returned, Liam was snoring on the bed. He was positioned in a way where he took up the majority of the bed, so Jane went to sleep in the other bed. She intended on returning to her residence when she woke up, where she would work from home that day. Jane claimed that she woke up to a man on top of her, committing an assault of a sexual nature. She described this man as taller than Liam and not bald. Another clue that this man was not Liam was that Jane could hear Liam snoring in the other bed. The police believed that the man who allegedly attacked Jane was Terence Crosbie. He had swiped the key card back into the hotel room at 1:55 a.m. According to Jane, as Terence continued the assault, he told her something like, "This guy is sleeping. I know you want this." Presumably, Terence was referring to Liam O'Brien. Terence then said that Liam can't even do this for you. What a loser. Jane ordered Terence to stop, but he continued the assault. Eventually, she was able to break free of Terence. He followed her around the room trying to kiss her and pushed her against a wall as she picked up her clothing. When Jane entered the bathroom and locked the door, Terence jiggled the handle. Again, these are all allegations made by Jane. At 2:15 a.m., Jane Doe left the hotel. 3 minutes later, she texted a friend and said that she had been assaulted. Jane Doe made her way home, changed her clothing, and went to a hospital. She brought the clothing she wore during the alleged assault with her. This is when Jane reported the alleged assault to the authorities. On March 16, Terence Crosbie was interviewed by the police. He denied committing any offense against Jane. He told the police that he was scheduled to fly back to Ireland in 3 days, on March 19, 2024. Terence then booked a flight on a different airline for that same day, March 16. He was arrested at the Boston Logan International Airport. By the time the police caught up with him, He was already on the aircraft. He was close to getting out of the country. In June 2025, Terence Crosbie's trial started. He testified in his own defense. Here is the story Terence supplied on the stand. When Terence returned to room 610 at 1:55 a.m., he knocked on the door and shouted for Liam. Receiving no reply, he used the flashlight on his cell phone to navigate to his bed. The bed was empty. Jane was not in his bed. Terence moved clothing off his bed, undressed, leaving only his boxer shorts on, and crawled under the covers. About 90 seconds later, he heard Jane climb out of Liam's bed and enter the bathroom. When she exited the bathroom, she rummaged around for her belongings in the dark and left. Terence did not have any interaction with Jane. He did not physically touch her. He did not even speak to her. Terence adamantly maintained that he was innocent, saying, "I 100% didn't do this. I've done nothing wrong." On June 20, 2025, the judge declared a mistrial. The jury had deliberated for over 22 hours, but could not reach a unanimous verdict. The state will retry the case. The next trial is tentatively scheduled for October 14, 2025. The judge increased the bail for Terence Crosbie from $10,000 to $50,000, believing that he was a flight risk. At the time I am making this video, Terence remains in jail. Now moving to my analysis. Terence Crosbie maintains his innocence, and he has a large number of supporters. They argue that there is plenty of reasonable doubt in this case. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts, of course, disagrees. They believe the evidence points toward the idea that Terence is guilty. This brings me to the question, was Terence Crosbie guilty of perpetrating an assault of a sexual nature against Jane Doe? Let's take a look at the evidence both for and against the idea that he was guilty, starting with the inculpatory factors. Jane Doe accused Terence Crosbie of assaulting her in room 610 of the Omni Parker house. The timeline she supplied to the police was consistent with electronic evidence, like video surveillance. Terence told the police that he was only in the room for about 2 minutes when Jane left, but his keycard was swiped at 1:55 a.m. Jane left at 2:15 a.m. That is a 20-minute difference. 3 minutes after leaving the hotel, Jane sent a text message to a friend indicating that she had been attacked, and she went to a hospital shortly after that. It was not like Jane waited weeks to make this claim about being assaulted. DNA from 2 male individuals was recovered from Jane. Testing indicated that one sample was probably from Liam O'Brien. The second set of male DNA could not be identified, but the Commonwealth argued this still supports the idea that Terence was guilty. Who else could have deposited this DNA? The mere presence of male DNA is bad news for Terence, even if it cannot be matched to him. When Terence was speaking with the police, he asked if his DNA could have ended up on Jane based on his self-service activity. He suggested that he engaged in this activity before Jane was in the room. The Commonwealth argued that Terence did not have time to raise the mainsail, so to speak, prior to the alleged assault. Terence told the police that he was flying back to Ireland on March 19, 2024, but then booked a flight on the same day of his interrogation. Why was he in such a hurry to leave the United States? Moving to the exculpatory factors, Terence Crosbie denied attacking Jane Doe, claiming that he never interacted with her at all in the hotel room. According to his defense, Jane had a history of binge drinking behavior. She had been drinking for over 6 hours before she made it to the Black Rose bar, which meant that she drank for over 10 hours in total. A substance use expert indicated that, at the time Jane reported the alleged assault, her BAC may have been almost 3 times the limit for driving in Massachusetts. It's possible that her memory was impaired. Jane indicated that she did not know Liam O'Brien's first or last name, and she did not remember even meeting Terence Crosbie, even though they met at the bar and he was in the hotel room when she and Liam arrived. Jane claimed that she did not know that Liam O'Brien had a roommate. If Jane could not remember meeting Terence on the 2 occasions when she met him, how would she remember him allegedly committing the assault? Jane never mentioned any details about Terence Crosbie's birthmarks or tattoos. She testified that she was trying not to look. Over time, Jane's statements have shifted a little bit. For example, initially she stated the attacker was about the same height as her. In Jane's story, the attacker referred to Liam O'Brien as a loser. The word loser is not used in Ireland as an insult the way it is in America. Terence stated that this is not a term he would have used. It seems odd that Terence would choose to attack Jane in a hotel room while his colleague was asleep in a bed a few feet away. How heavily did Liam O'Brien sleep? Even if he was a heavy sleeper, would Terence have known that? Would he have been willing to bet on that? DNA found on Jane came from 2 male contributors. One was probably Liam, but the other sample could not be identified because it was too small. Jane Doe consumed alcohol for over 10 hours and then went to a hotel room with a random stranger she met in a bar. Given this behavior, one could make a case that the other DNA sample was not from Terence, but rather from some other man. Terence did change flights to leave the United States earlier than expected after being interrogated, but this doesn't necessarily point to guilt. He said that he was scared by the police interrogation. It stands to reason that many people in his situation would have been interested in getting out of the country where they were being accused of a felony. When considering all the evidence in this case, do I believe that Terence Crosbie was guilty? In my opinion, I think the probability of his guilt is about 50-50. It's his word against the word of Jane Doe. I believe he is not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. There are many reasonable doubts. Jane could be confused about what happened. After all, she had been consuming a lot of alcohol. She could be lying. Maybe the encounter with Terence never happened, or it was consensual. And it is difficult to believe that Jane was not impaired. She doesn't seem like a particularly credible witness. Now moving to my next thought. The facts presented in this case offer the potential to explore a thought exercise about this type of alleged crime, one where it is essentially the word of one person against another, and no substantial evidence is available to support one side over the other. The best move for Terence would have been not saying anything to the police. This is always the best move, and there are no exceptions. For example, his comments about the 5-digit disco, so to speak, were used against him during the trial, and the jury asked the judge for more information about these comments. Clearly, they thought the comments were important. Despite this reality about the unwise nature of talking to the police, let's put that aside for a moment and venture into an alternate universe where talking to them could potentially be beneficial. This leads us to a compelling thought exercise, which is not applicable to many cases. This may be helpful to explore why people may tend to believe one story over the other. If instead of denying having sex with Jane, what if Terence offered a different story? What if he said he entered room 610 at 1:55 a.m., he climbed in bed, 90 seconds later, Jane assaulted him. He broke free from her, and she left the room. Essentially, what if Terence made the exact same accusation as Jane? This would have completely shifted the focus of the entire case. Now it wouldn't be just about one person accusing and one person denying. Rather, it would be 2 people accusing and denying. The whole idea about whether sex occurred would be irrelevant because both parties would have admitted that it did. The real issue would be who initiated it and was it consensual. These questions are much more difficult to resolve. This thought exercise exposes a key weakness of the Commonwealth's case and highlights a broader tendency to assume that a person making an accusation is somehow more credible than a person issuing a denial. With both parties making accusations, the playing field seems more level, but it shouldn't take 2 accusations to get to neutrality. Now returning from the alternate universe to the facts of this case, Jane is stating that a crime occurred. Terence is stating that a crime did not occur. There's nothing about being the accuser that makes Jane automatically more credible than Terence. She's on offense, but the person on offense doesn't get an automatic bonus in credibility. If Terence had been an accuser as well, he may have fared better. Now, of course, Terence did not accuse anybody of anything, but contemplating the shift in this case that would have occurred if he did offers another perspective to gain insight on how a case like this is perceived. Now moving to my final thoughts. This case demonstrates how powerful an accusation is, even when there is little or nothing to corroborate it. If Terence is not guilty, then he really did walk into a nightmare. He came to the United States to march in a parade, and now probably feels like a parade marched over him. It's difficult to identify a lesson learned in this unusual case, except to avoid being in any situation where there is even a remote possibility of being targeted by a false accusation. I don't think that's a very realistic lesson, but unfortunately, it's the only one this case seems to be teaching. Those are my thoughts on the case of Terence Crosbie. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon.